Hello folks, it is David here, back again with episode 5 of the DarkspiderCast. It may be just a day late or so-ish, but I'm still kind of aiming for like the first half of the, or at least the halfway point of the week anyways. But, I'm still struggling, still trying to keep things as far as time management is concerned, kind of concentrated as far as where the podcast needs to be recorded, where it needs to be as far as just material. Plus, we had a lot go down over the past couple of days as far as gaming news, so I really don't want to spend too much time on the intro portion because there's actually quite a lot to talk about as far as gaming news, gaming showcases, for the better, for the worse, for the far more worse. And also another reason for why it's a little bit on the late side, I actually have a good chunk, a good little plethora here of job interviews that I've been taking care of this week thus far. I just got back, well, not right this second, but earlier today I got back from one, and I actually have for sure one, and then possibly a second, or I guess I should say a third, later on in the week. So I got those things to take care of, so hopefully we'll be seeing some form of change in the financial department of my life here, or as far as like the employment side of things, as far as money flow, finances flow, and make sure that things move forward. So, things might be looking on the up and up there. Two of them are LA based, and another one is here. It's kind of here in town. And that's the one I'm a little bit more hesitant, not only because it's here in the town that I'm explicitly trying to get out of, but also because the person in question that wants to do the interview wants to do it at 9 a.m. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I really do not want to wake up to interview for a job that is, content creation wise, it's video editing, but it's on site and it's up here rather than in a much more flourishing place like Los Angeles or even Culver City for that matter. I would gladly take Culver City over continuously working here up in the high desert. Like, it's just so fucking hot up here. And on top of that, wants to meet up at 9 a.m. I don't know. Like, it's just it's a little bit on the tiffy side for my personal taste. So that's why I'm kind of like thinking to myself, like, do I really want to go through with this, or do I want to put like some roadblocks and be like, hey, I can meet at 9 a.m. Do you want to meet up at this other time and place or this other thing, to just kind of like, provide a little bit of hesitance to see if he genuinely wants me. Who knows? I don't know. I'm still in the thought process like that. I don't want to think too terribly like that. But anyways, outside of those things that I'm taking care of, also, like I said, trying to create more content, while at the same time, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's not a topic, at least it's not a topic yet, but YouTube it's a big thing right now on a personal level and also on a widespread, massive hysteria kind of level. Because on a personal level, my videos lately have not been doing too well. But I don't want to complain about it too much. I really don't. Like, objectively, I see so much data that I can see and clearly be like, okay, something needs to be fixed. Something needs to be taken care of, because there's things going down in the analytics that I'm like, okay, what I need to do is I need to like sit down for a good hour or so one of these days. And like I said, I've been busy trying to fit in these interviews while at the same time going about doing my daily thing as far as going to the gym and of course eating, exercising, stuff like that. I'm choking. And also, getting the other content that I'm obviously talking about right now up and going so that the channel can grow more. Except lately, views have been on the downside. And I'm trying to see, like I said, what I'm really overdue for is a session to like sit down and be like, what is going on with my analytics? What is specifically overperforming or performing rather well, or what's underperforming? What can I improve on? And see exactly what I can extrapolate for the analytics to take advantage of and hopefully grow the channel. Because lately I've been in a bit of a rut, and my attitude and my complacency towards my content has kind of been going in that direction as well. Like, I admittedly feel like I have been going through a bit of the motions when it comes to creating the content that I'm doing as far as the reviews. Most recently, I did something that was a little bit different than I was generally uploading or creating thus far, which was my reaction / breakdown of the Gotham Knights trailer that was debuted at Summer Games Fest. And more on Summer Games Fest and all these other different kind of conventions and things that have happened in the past couple of days as far as gaming is concerned. We'll talk about that in due time. But I did that video. I did a breakdown. I kind of, felt a little inspired by Maximilian Dude because he does all these breakdown videos, and lately he's been going crazy, crazy ham on the Resident Evil 4 remake and Street Fighter 6 content. So he's been breaking down videos, analyzing them frame by frame, and I kind of wanted to do something like that, and hopefully, if possibly from this point forward, depending on exactly where the demand is, or if I should like refocus my energy towards another aspect of the channel as far as what the analytics are telling me. But I wanted to do something similar like that for Spider-Man and Batman content around the realm of video games, and seeing that Summer Games Fest was going to have a trailer for Gotham Knights, albeit a very fucking short trailer, I decided to check it out and do it in that style, and that was my video this past Friday. I post on Tuesdays and Fridays, so I thought to myself, okay, Friday, instead of a McFarlane toy review, let me do that Gotham Knights video, and then the McFarlane toy review, which was the Endless Winter Batman figure review, will go up on Tuesday, which was, as of the recording of this video, earlier today, this morning. Here's the thing, though. The Gotham Knights video that I posted on Friday from the Summer Games Fest trailer, this morning's Endless Winter Batman figure review, the last Spider-Man figure review, Marvel Legends, that I did, and even the McFarlane figure review before that, basically the last 3 or 4-ish videos, which if I upload twice a week, then that's taking about 2.5-ish weeks of content there. Almost every video, like quite literally, almost every video has ranked somewhere between a 7 out of 10 at best to a flat 10 out of 10 at worst. And for those of you who don't do Twitter and are just listening in here, on your favorite platform of choice, that's not great, all right? This is not a good way to rank because, when you think of 10 out of 10, there's a difference between rank and rating. Rating a 10 out of 10 is obviously good. 10 out of 10, perfect score. Or 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10. But when you rank, especially amongst the top 10, amongst your last 10 uploads as far as your YouTube analytics, ranking within the 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10s, it's bad. It's terrible. Your video is tanking compared to the last 10 videos that you've uploaded. Almost every time that you upload a video, it has to rank at number 1 at least for the first couple of days, the first 24 hours ish, around that realm, and gradually over time it's gonna dip down to like 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, etc. But to consecutively do 9 out of 10 and 10 out of 10s, and only one of those 3 or 4 videos actually have at best, which was today's video, the Endless Winter Batman video, be a 7 out of 10, I'm just like, what is going on? And here, what makes it confusing is that the Gotham Knights video is a little different than the other stuff. I'll admit that. It's the single video that stands out the most as being objectively different than all the other content that I've been posting. But the other content, I look at my analytics, I look at the videos that people are most searching for that fit with the criteria of videos that I've been uploading and that have been, like, I go to the tab that says, videos that have been growing your channel in the past 28 days. Like, out of the 10, 7 or 8 of them are McFarlane figure reviews. So it's confusing that I've been posting McFarlane figure reviews much more consecutively, and yet those videos are still going at the 8 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 level as far as ranking. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not performing well. They're only getting like 100 views in 24 hours. And I know that sounds like a first world YouTube problem. I understand some people can struggle to get 100 views. I'm just saying that relatively speaking to the rest of how my channel has performed in the past few months, especially since getting monetized, I don't know if it's because it's been monetized that it's underperforming. My other theory, and here's where this other little detail, this other little wrinkle kind of comes into play and makes me go, okay, maybe it's not a personal thing. Maybe it doesn't lean too much on monetization. Or because, what I'm about to say, before I jumped ahead here, other channels have actually not reported necessarily, but have mentioned in passing, either on vlog updates on YouTube or live streams on Twitch when they're just chatting, just chatting category, and they're just literally chatting with the audience. One specifically, Bob Wolf of the Wolf Den podcast, not too long ago, he was doing a stream where he was just chatting with the audience, his community. And he had this was on Friday, because I know for a fact it was a Friday, because on Fridays he posts his own videos. He posts every Friday. And he was saying that not only the video that he posted that Friday that he was streaming, but also the past 2 or 3 videos, so the past 2 or 3 Fridays, his videos frankly have not been ranking well either. They've all been ranking in like the 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 mark. And this is Bob Wolf of the Wolf Den channel. Wolf Den on YouTube, it has, I want to say the last time I checked, somewhere around 600,000 to 700,000 subscribers. It's not a small channel at all. And so if he is saying that his video's underperforming, he even tossed it out there. He put it out there in the ether, and it's been making me think an awful lot. It's probably just the summer. It's something that we can't control here. It's summertime. We're finally in the crux of the summer where we have graduates or people or simply just people who go to school in general, really in general, from grad school, regular grad school, to college kids, etc., that are not taking school right now. Because they're not taking school, they're watching YouTube a lot less. They're less prone or privy to checking out the recommendation system on their homepage. And they're out doing what a lot of people like to do on the summertime: go on vacation, just go outside and either quite literally just play or go out with their friends or just be more social on a general sense. And because of that, they're just not spending an awful lot of time on YouTube. And so Bob actually said, I'm paraphrasing here, it's the summertime, people are not on YouTube. And so this made me go, okay, one of these days, and I finally thought of to do this yesterday on Monday, as of Monday the 13th, June 13th, I posted a community post asking people, hey, basically, and I told a very short form, very short form, short little paragraph breaking down the story that I just mentioned, and then at the very end, posting a poll asking people, hey, has the summertime influenced your guys' watch patterns on YouTube as a watcher, as a viewer? Are you And basically, I just gave them three choices. One, which was yes, it's the summertime, I got vacation, I got things to do, I'm not watching YouTube that much. Or no, second option, no, I'm watching YouTube the exact same way I was doing it before. And then the third option, kind of like an intermediary. I think I said it right. Anyways, I pretty much said, it kind of depends on the creator. Some I'll start to watch a little less, and then others I still watch the same exact way that I did before. And so far, it's only been about a cool 24 hours, but so far, I want to say the last time I checked, it was like 52, 53% said, no, I still watch the exact same way. So more than half. Okay. But it's still a little peculiar that just a little under half of the rest, practically the rest of the votes summed up in either the no, I have summer things to take care of, I'm not watching YouTube like that anymore, or it depends on the creator. There's some creators that I like enough to continuously watch every time they upload, and then there's others where if it's summertime, I'm gonna watch a lot less and I'd rather go out and do something. So even though the majority, technically by technical standards, the majority says no, nothing changed, the numbers on the other two options, what I'm trying to say here is that the other two options had higher numbers than I personally was expecting. And so it's made me think an awful lot for the past 24 hours, ever since that poll has gradually generated more votes, more insight. And because of that, I thought to myself, okay, let me, do some more research on my own personal analytics. Let me watch some other YouTube experts and educators' videos as far as how to grow a channel, how to take advantage of the packaging method, which is to make sure that thumbnails are better, titles are better, they're much more eye-catching, more attentive to detail, and they can grasp somebody's attention to want to click and get them to stay through the editing and through my personality and my information. If things don't look a little livelier by the end of this month, we're officially halfway through June. If we reach the end of June and nothing has really percolated as far as this level of, as far as taking what I can learn from these analytics and from these experts and educators and their advice and being able to manifest it into some legitimate growth, then I think I might start reining back a little bit on the upload rotation. Instead of uploading twice, maybe I'll just do once a week, or maybe stop posting on a specific day and just come up with a interval, like a specific interval of either 4 or 5 days, not 4 to 5 days, but either 4 or 5 days. I'll have to decide on one of those, so that every 4 or 5 days I will for sure post the next video that I have set up on my list of videos to do, as far as figure reviews, Spider-Man and Batman content, movie reactions, etc. and regardless of when it falls on the week, you know what I mean? So instead of doing Tuesdays and Fridays, I'll just say every 5 days a video will go up. Doesn't matter which day of the week, it'll fall every 5 days, and I'll try to shoot in advance and upload in advance and schedule in advance. So regardless, I'll just count every 5 days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Post 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 post, and maybe see how that goes, see how that scheduling goes down, see if that creates some kind of spontaneity, or maybe it brings in some people that happen to be on the platform on those days, as opposed to the static 2 to 3 Tuesdays and Fridays that I've been uploading. I don't know, like it's kind of churning the creative bowels, and hopefully creating a movement in the direction of experimenting with the channel. I know I got graphic there, but I'm sorry. And hopefully trying something new. That way, maybe this will create a domino effect to maybe create, still keep it niche down to like Batman and Spider-Man, but create a new style of review. Maybe I'll still continue doing figure reviews, but maybe change out the template. Maybe create a different style of thumbnail. I don't know, but I generally feel like on the horizon that something needs to change, and I feel like it was brought about by a combination of the season, the way that the algorithm is probably fluctuating as it is, and also the behind-the-scenes stuff that's going down at YouTube. Hey guys, David here with a quick edit. If you guys are watching this on the YouTube channel for the DarkspiderCast, I noticed, that at the beginning of this portion where I was talking about YouTube, I mentioned that there were two things that I wanted to talk about in regards to YouTube, whether it be on the personal side with my niche channel, and then on the public side with some behind-the-scenes stuff that's going down on YouTube. Unfortunately, let's just say that topic is just so sensitive that talking about it on YouTube is actually kind of like a at your own risk sort of thing for both small and big creators alike. That's literally how crazy this whole situation has gotten. So what I decided to do is to take that portion of the podcast, splice it out of the YouTube version that you're listening to right now, and pretty much making it a podcast exclusive portion of the episode. So if you guys want to listen to it, you guys can find the Anchor FM link in the description. That'll take you to the Anchor FM page, and from there you can then either listen to it on Anchor or on your favorite podcast platform of choice, whether it be Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, etc. So check that link out in the description if you guys want to find it, because that's honestly the only real way that I can at the very least, with peace of mind, talk about that situation without risk, in a matter of speaking, having it traced to not only the DarkspiderCast channel, but also the main Darkspider David channel, and have that whole situation just kind of blow up in my face. I've worked a little too hard on this to kind of touch on that in that manner. I don't necessarily have the following just yet to be comfortable just freely talking about that. Others are, but if channels that are have huge followings are talking about it, and even they're seeing the repercussions of that, which is unjustifiably so, like it's terrible, I just don't want to deal with that business right now. So if you guys want to check that out, check out the link in the description to check out the podcast version of this entire episode. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and move on forward. Okay, let's switch some gears here. Eventually, we're going to get to all the video game talk and all these conventions lately that, I keep calling them conventions for some reason. These showcases, these digital events, and things like that, because we got quite a bit to get through. But real quick, just want to get some reviews, some breakdowns, some things that have also been coming down the pipeline, some stuff that I managed to check out last week. So 3 things that I managed to watch back to back to back with the lovely girlfriend that I was even surprised myself that I was able to get them out of the way so quickly, that we were able to just binge them left to right, was 3 things in particular: 2 episodes of 2 different shows and a movie. All right, we're pretty much coming up with the well, I honestly don't know where I was going there. But last Wednesday, me and the girlfriend checked out Top Gun Maverick in IMAX, which was the condition that I set for being able to watch that movie. I told my girlfriend, we're not watching Top Gun if it's not in IMAX. Not only because it's Top Gun and the way that it was filmed, the way that it was being demonstrated in the trailers and the marketing made it seem, it's like, hey, this movie was shot in IMAX, or at least the action sequences were shot in IMAX. You got to check it out in IMAX. It was also the last week it was being shown in IMAX prior to it being bumped out for Jurassic World Dominion to take over in the IMAX theaters. Another reason though is because lately, as bougie as this is gonna sound, I feel like I've been trying to see as many movies in IMAX as possible, even movies that you wouldn't otherwise expect to be seen in IMAX or required to be in IMAX. You don't expect the scale to demand that format. Case in point, not too long ago, me and the girlfriend saw Everything Everywhere All at Once. I already did a review on the podcast here and a couple episodes prior, but we saw it in IMAX. Could have easily seen it in a regular theater up here in my local place, my local theater. But let's just say that I don't live in the kind of area where I'm gonna have the most pleasant experience simply just going to the fucking theater, because some other people like to go to the theater because they're bored, not because they want to watch the fucking movie. Whereas if you go see a movie at IMAX price, you at least have some kind of peace of mind knowing that the rest of the people in there paid that price for the same ideology in regards to the film, which is that, hey, they're there to watch the film. They respect the film enough to be like, I want to give it a much more prestigious canvas in the form of this bigger screen, which means I respect the film. I actually want to see the film. In layman's terms, I pretty much gatekeep the clientele up here in my local theater from seeing it in just a cheaper theater versus seeing it in IMAX. So that's rant aside. We finally saw Top Gun Maverick. And I'm trying to get these reviews out of the way because there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to get to, and we still have yet to get to what I've been playing. So Top Gun Maverick doesn't match the hype, because I know that a lot of people, this has been a movie that has been actually quite literally been talked about by almost everybody. It's been a movie that's actually been riding on the coattails, see what I did there, of the word of mouth, because just recently it's actually become the highest the highest grossing domestically released film of 2022 so far. And people, we need to consider the fact that we've had a full-blown Marvel movie, a very anticipated Marvel movie, Multiverse of Madness, come out. We had the Batman, we had a couple of other movies. I'm trying to think of any other big heavy hitters, but out of all those movies, Top Gun is actually the highest grossing. That is nuts. That is kind of nuts. And Tom Cruise, say what you want about him as a person. Everybody's got a different viewpoint. I know I got a different viewpoint. But as an actor and as someone who respects the craft of an authentic action movie, this movie pretty much reminded me that, yeah, if you're looking for genuine action that doesn't need obviously a reliance on CG, which is a huge topic of discussion amongst the industry, but also you want there to be deliver a movie that, sure, is maybe part of a franchise, but doesn't need to have this direct connection to this and that. I think Tom Cruise nailed that. I think Tom Cruise and a lot of people that are part of his team, because that's the thing, is that Tom Cruise has really pretty much come to terms with not just being an actor, he's pretty much a brand. Because when I think of Tom Cruise, I also think about the fact that he's probably going to collaborate with Joseph Kosinski, which is the director of this movie, and he also directed Oblivion, which also had Tom Cruise. He also did Tron Legacy. And so I think about that. I also think about the fact that he's probably going to work with Christopher McQuarrie, which he worked with on Jack Reacher, as well as the last two Mission Impossible movies, Rogue Nation and Fallout, and he's going to be working with again in the next two Mission Impossibles, which is basically 7 and 8, or Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Part 2. And we got the trailer, obviously, for the new one. And just like with Top Gun, that new trailer showcases a big, massive stunt that Tom Cruise himself is doing. And even I don't know, I got to choose my words carefully here, because you know who else used to do this and would just leave all of us in awe back in the late 80s, throughout the 80s and 90s? Jackie Chan. I remember whenever there was a Jackie Chan movie coming out, either to theaters or to VHS so that my mom could rent it or something like that, I would get so hyped. Sometimes I would get even more hyped than a superhero movie, even though superhero movies weren't necessarily all the norm in the 90s. It wasn't, it was barely even becoming a norm in the early 2000s, even though we had X-Men and Daredevil and such. Even then, when Jackie Chan was delivering a movie, I was like, oh shit, stop, because we knew what we were in for. We were in for someone who respects the craft of martial arts and respects the craft of entertainment. and he was going to deliver almost 90%, 95% of the time. The other 5% was most of the time ended up being an Americanized movie that was focused on his name and not so much what he was able to bring, and a movie that didn't really have to do so much with his influence, aka the tuxedo. Um, so I feel like now we might be in that same era with Tom Cruise, in the form that if he's going to be doing an action movie, you could expect him to do the stunts. And Top Gun is able to hone in on that by delivering action sequences that, yeah, I gotta be honest, if you didn't see the movie in IMAX when it was in there, I feel kind of bad for you, son, because that's the way to see the movie. The screen opens up, you're in the cockpit, you're taking these twists and turns. The audio system, just, I can feel it in my chest. And if a movie could be made into an energy drink, that's Top Gun Maverick. But it's a good energy. It's not an energy drink that's going to help you, that's going to make you feel crashed. It's going to be like one of the more recent ones that have been able to polish up a little bit of the formula where you might not be as energized later, and it might be a little bad for your sugar if you haven't been taking care of yourself rightfully as far as your health is concerned. But if you have been nailing a balanced diet, taking this energy drink along with your nourishing meal will give you that added boost of getting you to the danger zone. Yes, I had to work that pun in there. And that's pretty much what this movie is. Now, is it perfect? Is it like a perfect 10 out of 10 and like probably the best film of the year thus far? Not really, because one of my a couple of criticisms, only two, is that one, the movie from a script standpoint is pretty solid. It really, really is, especially fulfilling the function of being what a lot of people are now coining the term legacy sequel. A legacy sequel was like Blade Runner 2049, Creed, a sequel that comes literally almost decades after the original, but it does the job of not only honoring that beloved original, but also creates something brand new in a different direction that feels like its own movie. And so far, everybody's in agreement that this, along with Blade Runner 2049, Creed, what was another one? I'm trying to think of another one. I'm blanking out right now. But there's a handful of them out there that are like great, where they're being called now legacy sequels. And this movie's able to check all the right boxes of honoring that original film while at the same time kind of concocting its own story and its own set of characters to get you to get you to be hooked on the story with the stakes. And arguably, like almost everybody agrees that this is arguably a better film than the original, because a lot of people will come to you and be like, hey, I understood what the plot of this movie was versus the first one. Whereas the first one, it has a plot. It's just not it's a pretty shallow one, because that movie's much shorter than this one, and yet the first one I felt longer than this one. This one's 2 hours and 10 minutes. The original was an hour and 49, and yet this one just breezed. I was like, oh shit, it's over. Damn, okay, I guess we're out of here. And so, yeah, that's because the pacing is done well. The action sequences, like I said, seeing them in IMAX, and even if you don't see them in IMAX, if you see them like on a big enough screen, whether it be in theaters or even at home, if someone's got a good, decent 55-inch, 65-inch with a good soundbar, you're still going to be rocking and rolling, because that's just how well they were able to shoot these action sequences inside of the cockpit, infusing technology, because that's the thing, is that they did this thing where they shot it practically, but at the same time, they still used digital effects to like fuse all the different angles that they were able to shoot from inside the cockpit to then give you that very wide angle look inside of the cockpit. I've seen some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it looks glorious. But going back to my nitpicks, is that one is that though it does a very capable job of being a legacy sequel, it also plays itself a little too safe. Without going into spoilers, let's just say that the teeth were a little dull, a dull in the tooth when it came to by the time credits rolled, where the first one was not afraid to go in areas as far as how the stakes could be on the higher side when being a naval pilot, such as Maverick and all the other characters, specifically Goose. Here, like I said, no spoilers, but they play it safe with certain decisions, whether it be with the new cast of characters or some old returning characters that you look at it and go, okay, it makes sense for them to have done that. That was kind of expected. That was, I kind of knew that this character was going to say this, or they ended up not doing something that otherwise would have shown the stakes or shown what exactly we were in for as far as the adrenaline that was infusing these action sequences to begin with. The other issue, and I feel like I might be more specific on this one, and I don't know if others will agree. I have yet to watch other people's full on reviews, but is it just me, or did I feel, like I said, no spoilers, but I feel like that ending was a reshoot. I have yet to find any evidence of this online. I looked it up on. I simply just did a simple Google search. I went on IMDb's trivia page, and nobody's saying this. So for now, I'll have to take it and say that it's not. But in terms of how it felt, I don't know. Is it just me, or did the ending to this movie felt kind of tacked on? It's funny because I'm at a crossroads here. It felt like a reshot ending. It felt like they had an ending, they tested it with audiences, they didn't like it, and they took advantage of of most recent delays they had with this movie. Because I remember this movie was supposed to come out, I think, sometime in the summer of 2020 or like Christmas 2020, and it kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed. So this movie has been in the can for a while, and I feel like maybe through test screenings they learned that a lot of people didn't like the ending, but they reshot the ending. However, unlike typical reshoots that are generally, kind of rushed, kind of half-assed, they actually took their time reshooting this ending. So even though the ending felt kind of like a reshoot, it was at least a well-done reshoot, if that makes any kind of sense. It didn't. It was paced well, it was edited well, acted well. I would say the only things that made it feel like a reshoot is a simple cut to black, and then the movie, it's almost like it switched reels, even though it's a digital projection. But if we were to still have on-film projection, it felt like someone took the reel and swapped it in with a secret one that they were sitting on. And the movie kept on going. Like, I was expecting it to start the resolution there, but then the movie keeps on going. And in that, and then some makeup. There were some shots where there was some lack of makeup that should be in the context of the scene, but there was no necessary makeup for me to go, is it just me, or the people that I'm watching here are a little too squeaky clean for the situation that they're in? And that to me made me go, am I watching a reshoot? Okay. But as it went on, it was, like I said, shot well, was edited well, and it was even written well, because they were able to write in something that kind of brought things somewhat full circle to not only earlier parts of the film, but also the first film. So that along with, like I said, the safety decisions they made with the story, those were my only little problems. Otherwise, though, yeah, I can definitely see the hype with Top Gun Maverick. So as soon as me and the girlfriend, we were done with this, we went home. And it was actually early enough because we saw the movie a little bit earlier in the afternoon. We got dinner at, I got myself a plate from Ono Hawaiian. She got herself a poke roll from a local poke place, enjoyed it. We got home, it was like almost 8-ish. Neither of us needed to go to bed early, so we thought to ourselves, hey, it's Wednesday. You know what that means. That's right, it's time for Obi-Wan and Ms. Marvel. So those are the two shows that we watched. I don't want to beat a dead horse any more than its decrepit, decomposing body has already been doing since last week with everybody else's take on the episode. So I'm not going to spend too much time in saying that, yeah, unfortunately, this last episode of Obi-Wan was trash. Yeah, if you've heard it already a number of times from other YouTubers and people on Twitter, etc., I'm throwing myself in there with them as well. It was a terrible episode. I knew that there was a red flag when I saw that this was the shortest episode. It was only like 37 minutes as opposed to the 40-something or even 55-minute opening premiere from the beginning from a couple weeks back. 37 minutes, that was it. I'm like, okay, I really hope that they're not rushing through shit. Well, if there was a positive thing to say about the episode, is that technically speaking, they didn't rush it. There was just nothing there because it was just an escape, a poorly executed escape mission, a break-in, or breakout, I should say, a breakout episode in terms of breaking somebody out of like some kind of prison-like complex, but with a lot of filler because the story didn't progress, character arcs didn't progress, characters were made worse via either dialogue or acting or directing. Everybody's like, you just hate Leia because of this, and I'm like, I can tell that people who are appearing to be terrible, it's not the actors, it's the writing and the directing. I don't know who's stepping in and going, do it like this, do it like that, but you can objectively not look at this shit and be like, yeah, I can tell it's not the, nothing against this specific actress. The actress who plays Riva, Moises Ingram, she's been getting, hate speech and racist tweets and messages and stuff like that, which is complete bullshit, and that shouldn't be happening to her. This episode, again, still, that is terrible to do. This is the first episode, however, where I went, wow, she actually was kind of bad here in terms of acting. What happened? And it finally dawned on me, it's not her. It's the writing and the directing. Actors can only do so much. And I know this because I mentioned this already in a couple of episodes back, she was terrific in The Queen's Gambit. I know she can act. I know she can be a great actress. So what the hell is happening here? It's the writing and the directing. All right, it can only take an actor and an actress so far. It really, really can. And some storytelling decisions in this episode. Again, I'm so glad I wasn't. I even turned to my girlfriend and was like, "Yo, is it really plausible that some other Imperial dude or woman or whatever Imperial person will not find a particular body that was just left there? That was just left there out in the open?" And even my girlfriend was like, yeah, that was weird. That was, she couldn't defend that. Even she found that funny. She was like, what the fuck? And then it gets even worse with the trench coat. You've seen the trench coat. You must have seen the trench coat memes of Obi-Wan, trying to sneak someone out via a trench coat in a very Scooby-Doo-ish kind of way. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but yeah, this was a bad episode. This was a really, oh my, what's going on? And what makes things worrisome is that we don't have 10 episodes to this. We don't have 8 or 9. We have 6, which means that, yes, this week we get the penultimate episode, to the limited series Obi-Wan, which means that if they cannot stick it in these next 2 episodes, guess what, guys? Obi-Wan goes out on a whimper because there's not going to be a second season. This is meant to be like a mini-series type thing, and it's looking like... I'm joking over here. It's looking like... things aren't looking good for Obi-Wan. I was already feeling kind of ho-hum in the first 3 episodes, even though there were arguably way cooler things in those first 3 episodes. This was finally the episode that I can barely, delve into my mind to go, was there anything good? Not really. And the night for Obi-Wan was made even worse when I was going to bed and thinking to myself, holy shit, Miss Marvel was way better than Obi-Wan tonight. How can that possibly be? And I'll use that as my segue into my take on that first episode of Miss Marvel, which was really, really cool. It really, really was. A little, kind of going back to what I was mentioning with Top Gun, is like a couple of things here and there were a little on the safe side as far as writing. There's certain archetypal things that are put there to just kind of lay the groundwork for what kind of personality Kamala Khan is, what kind of personality her family is, her friend, etc., where she's at in terms of Jersey City, in terms of her going to school, in terms of her being a huge, not only Avengers fan, but Captain Marvel fan, which is, pretty much in line with her lore. Some would argue it's probably the only thing that's in line with her lore, but more on that later. But overall, I was like, okay, they're doing a good job of making her likable. It's kind of a little middle of the road as far as her writing, as far as like her back and forth, her banter with her friends or her family and things like that is just a little on the generic side. But what was not generic and made me go, holy shit, this is legitimately pretty cool, is the style and the identity that the show is so far setting itself up to be, compared to the other Marvel Disney Plus shows, with the style that a lot of people are making comparisons to Scott Pilgrim, with both the comic book and the graphic novel and the movie by Edgar Wright, where you have like graphics showing up on the screen. There's a particular sequence that I really, really liked that could have been a very bland sequence of Kamala and her friend just riding the bike, thinking of ideas for a costume. But as they come up with those ideas, you see those ideas show up as graffiti on the buildings behind them as we ride with them in a singular, like a 2-minute long one-take shot. And I was like, that was creative. That was cool. And then there's another sequence where you have Kamala and her friend texting each other. And unlike the House of Cards way of showing text or Mr. Robot style of showing text or whatever, they do something completely different. Kind of similar, kind of inspired, but similar, playing into the artistry of Kamala's character, into the way that she likes to doodle and graphic design and her influence with color, especially with her culture and such. They play with that, and I'm like, yo, this is something that I'm legitimately kept thinking about even after I had watched the episode, and I'm probably going to be thinking about going into the remaining few episodes for the show. I think it's going to be also 6 episodes. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, there was just an established identity that Miss Marvel has already been able to hone in just one singular episode that's already made me want to look forward. Here I am in front of the microphone going, I look forward more to episode 2 of Miss Marvel than I do to the penultimate episode of Obi-Wan. That is nuts. Now, outside of that, like I said, there's not much else to really chew on with this episode except she comes across this bracelet that was passed down from her grandmother, I believe, that imbues her powers. Now, her powers have been a point of contention with people that are familiar with the comics, because in the comics, she gets, I believe, and please tell me if I'm getting this wrong. I don't read the comics, but from what I can remember, from what I could also remember from the game, is that basically Terrigen Mist is what infuses her with her powers that allows her to embiggen, which pretty much gives her the same powers as Mr. Fantastic. She's able to stretch and get big and elongate and stretch out and things like that. However, here, it's the bracelet that gives her the powers. She has a brief, almost Moon Knight kind of vision where she steps into a different realm. She's like these bodies. She comes back to reality, and then during the convention, which looked dope, by the way, I would love to go to a convention like this, is when she demonstrates her powers, not only because she's, disoriented with the flashing of the lights, but blinding lights. I get it now because of the opening song. But she's able to save one of her competitors, which was a popular girl at school, via stretching out. Except she doesn't stretch out. She kind of, I guess you could say, they pretty much are on the road of making Miss Marvel the Marvel equivalent of Green Lantern, in the way that she's able to materialize things with her mind that kind of resemble her powers from the comics, but don't really do. And so people are right now a little upset that they changed it in this direction. I'm not upset, but at the same time, I haven't seen a legitimate explanation to change it. I don't know if it's because they didn't want the effects to look too goofy, but at the same time, what I did see on screen when she reaches out and throws out that crystallized hand, I'm like, how is that any different, really? That's the question. Maybe by episode 2 or so, once she tests out her powers a little bit more, especially after telling her story to her friend, who obviously saw it, so she has to tell him, and Bruno, we're talking about this Bruno for sure. I have yet to see an actual incentive to want to make this decision, but otherwise I don't see an inherent problem with it. I have more of a problem with her mother than I do with anything to do with her powers. Now, before I go on any further, as I watched the episode, my girlfriend kept telling me to calm down whenever her mother came into the picture and had dialogue with her and said things. And that's because this is where some of the cultural background with Miss Marvel comes into play. I mean, we already saw a lot of things worked into the show as far as her Pakistani background in terms of like the music, the colorful nature of her room, the way that she wants to put something of her culture, of her Pakistani culture, onto her to her Captain Marvel costume, which is very likable and very compelling. But one of the things that is on the opposite end of what you would want to see as far as a culture influx is her mother, who's trying to, for lack of a better term, trying to put her into a box. Here's the thing. I hated her mother, but I completely understand why she needs to be written this way. You get me? Like, I'm not going to protest and say, oh, she needs to go or anything like that. No. She needs to be in the show, and she needs to be behaving this way, and she needs to be saying these things. As much as I hate it, she needs to. And the reason why is because for those of you who are not, who don't know, who are new to the podcast, new coming over from the YouTube channel, coming over from my social media, I'm Mexican. And even though it's not one-to-one same, there are ideologies similar, not 100% same, but kind of similar, kind of resemblant ideologies and generational gaps as far as the prior generational just not getting certain things that are very similar to the way that my parents and even some of my grandparents would just not get. There's certain things that Kamala's mom said in this episode that I've heard my mom say, that I've hated when my mom said. And so I saw me and Kamala in those particular moments in this episode. So even though my blood was boiling when Kamala's mom would say certain things without any logical explanation, without any compelling argument, just laying down the iron boot and saying, "Oh, you're not going to this thing," you know. As much as I hated it, I understood it. I understood why they wrote her mom that way. Um, and it's a very interesting aspect of the show because it's interesting to see that a lot more content, a lot more properties such as Ms. Marvel, and then most recently this year we have had two others that have pretty much been tackling the generational gap from the Asian American corner with another Disney property Turning Red, and then on the other side that's non-Disneyfied, that's actually become one of the biggest movies of the year thus far, critically and commercially, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is just mentioned earlier. It's all about tackling, it's all about finally coming to terms that some of the toxicity from prior generations cannot continue to be passed on. Shit is changing. And you can't, the whole purpose of having kids is to make sure that those kids are better than us. They can't be stuck in that same box as us. And that's one of the aspects that looks like Ms. Marvel is tackling. That's one of the things that I loved about Everything Everywhere All at Once. I hear Turning Red does a good job at it as well. Unfortunately, I haven't seen the movie because of timing. I really want to, though. It looks funny as well. So hopefully one of these days, me and the girlfriend will finally sit and watch it because I know it's on Disney Plus and such. But so far, that's one of the aspects I have to thoroughly respect with Ms. Marvel. And one of the reasons for why, as much as I hated the mother, I understood why she needed to be written that way. I'm hoping for an arc that will bring her full circle and realizing that she can't keep talking to Kamala this way. She needs to realize that now she's something bigger, something more, and she can't keep putting her in a box. Most especially now that she's got powers. Now, to play devil's advocate, yeah, Kamala could have toned it a little back when she heard her dad that way. Her dad was just so ecstatic to be the Hulk, the big Hulk, so to speak. And the reason why that was such a heartfelt moment was because up until that point, we were really loving the dad objectively. Like, everybody agrees that the dad was much more likable. Why? Because the dad is much more open-minded to change. Notice that between the two of them, he was the one that wanted to know more about the technology that Bruno was introducing via the Alexa ripoff. They can't use Alexa or Siri because of rights, so they have to come up with something called Zuzu. But it's principally the same thing. And so it's through this conversation, it's through his his huge fondness for the technology that makes him a character that you look at and go, yeah, he wants to be more open-minded to change. And that's what made you like him more. And that's why it was so heartbreaking to see him get sad when Kamala said, I don't want to go with my parents. But at the same time, you can't fully hate Kamala for saying that, because that was one moment out of an entire episode where she's played incredibly well by, God, I always blank out on her last name. I feel terrible. I know her first name is Imani. Can't remember her last name. I feel terrible. But the actress who plays Ms. Marvel, she's doing an exceptional job. She's super likable, super compelling, and yeah, I'm in for the ride. I'm in for Ms. Marvel. I'm totally down. Will it be one of my favorites? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if it follows the same kind of blueprint that's built for success for shows that have been able to nail it, like WandaVision and Loki and Moon Knight. We'll see. We'll see where things go. But right now, like I mentioned before, I'm most definitely much more pumped for Ms. Marvel than I am for Obi-Wan. And that's the reality we live in. We are almost not even halfway through, and I still have yet to talk about what I've been playing, which is pretty. Here's the thing, it's gonna be a beefy chunk here with the what I've been playing because, once again, since with all this free time, and also a very binge-worthy weekend with the girlfriend because both of us were off. Obviously, me because I don't have a job at the moment, but she was actually finally off. I feel like this is the first weekend she had off to herself, and a lot of stars aligned in a way where not only was she off, but like half of her family was gone, the other half was still at home, but they were kind of like keeping to themselves. So, looking at the situation and looking at the fact that the Quarry was releasing that very Friday, I pulled the trigger on the Quarry. I went ahead and I bought it, and we quite frankly binged it the entire weekend. So I'm here to talk about the Quarry and about another game that I played from my Game Pass backlog for 2022, and I'll talk about that momentarily. But for now, I just want to quickly, or effectively, talk about the Quarry, which I've already done to an extent on Discord. I've done a little bit on Twitter, but I haven't really gone into full expansive details as to how I feel about this game. And for those of you who don't know, The Quarry is a horror game. It's funny because generally when it comes to games, you always think of the word, when it comes to the horror genre in video games, there's always some kind of subgenre that's always feels like it's attached, whether it be psychological horror or survival horror or some other means of that kind. Whereas here, I just feel compelled to just say horror because for those of you who are not familiar with Supermassive Games, who's the developer of this game, they've been through this genre many times already, and they kind of broke out. You know, they were a company that had already existed, but they really broke out with the game that put them on the map, which was Until Dawn in 2015, I believe. That's when it came out. And most notably, everybody loved it, you know, for its camp, but also for its authentic roots embedded in the horror genre, you know, kind of tackling the whole cabin in the woods type of angle with these kids being up in these mountains, but something is stalking them, and there's these like twists and turns of what's going down and things like that. So a lot of people liked it, and of course, one of the big hooks about the game was its replayability, seeing all the different outcomes of how many people get killed versus how many of them could survive at your hand, figuring out the butterfly effect system, as well as having this therapist talking to you in between chapters to kind of influence how you make decisions and how you kind of interact with these characters and all that kind of stuff. The Quarry is pretty much a spiritual direct successor to Until Dawn. I know that since then we've had entries in the Dark Pictures anthology series, which is, you know, Man of Medan, House of Ashes, Little Hope. Those are meant to be much more on the smaller scale. They still kind of tackle that similar genre as far as you making decisions and choosing whether certain people live or die, but they're very anthological in the sense that they're kind of like their own thing. And therefore, Supermassive, in multiple interviews, have said that The Quarry is more so the direct sequel or the direct successor to Until Dawn and not so much to those anthology games, especially because this is supposed to be a full price title as opposed to the much more, I guess you could say, budget friendly entries in the Dark Pictures anthology because each one's only $30 over there. This one's going for the full $60 on last gen consoles, $70 on current gen. And that's a weighty price for a game that's coming off the pedigree of Until Dawn because despite getting a lot of great reception initially, there are people who will come to the counter argument for a game like Until Dawn where that's also a very compelling counter argument, which is that they're kind of very light video games in the sense that there's not much in the ways of interactivity. They're almost like visual novels, or interactive novels in the sense that you flick the sticks a couple of times for certain action sequences or QTEs, and then when you're not doing that, you're pretty much just choosing whether certain characters live or die based on verbal and action choices. That's a legitimate argument, except with Until Dawn, there was a heavy amount of weight behind some of those choices because you like these characters. There were, and despite their cheese and their corny dialogue at times, and I don't want to say wooden portrayal, but just kind of like their blasé kind of approach or reaction to some things. You like them. You sympathize with them. They kind of got you hooked. And like I said, they some of them, not all of them, but some of them were empathetic, and they have this kind of catharsis behind them as to why they were in the cabin in the first place, and all this kind of stuff. And that's ultimately one of the very significantly lacking things about the Quarry. I mentioned this in my Twitter post, on my Discord post, is that as me and the girlfriend played through the 8 to 9 hour campaign, it takes about 8 to 9 hours, maybe closer to 10 if you take your time with some of the more explorative areas where you can kind of come across these tarot cards and these collectibles and things like that you can kind of add to the collectibles side of the menu, as far as going down to clues and kind of piecing things together, things that are more or less kind of optional. They enhance the experience, but they're never really required to progress. Once we were done with that run, which we played over the weekend, so we played, I think, like the first third of the game on a Saturday night and then finished it off on Sunday. And as the credits are rolling there, I was thinking to myself, like, why can I not get behind the Quarry the way that I was behind Until Dawn? And it just kept gnawing at me. It just kept kind of itching and crawling again underneath my skin, almost like a creature wants to come out. See what I did there? And it finally hit me as the credits ended and we were splashed back onto the main screen. I see it right there in the corner, the little haunting logo of 2K Interactive. And, or is it just 2K? I think Take Two is the one that says interactive. But anyways, and for those of you who obviously know 2K Publishing, they're the ones behind the NBA games, plethora of other different kinds of games that are under different developers, but they're this huge video game publishing conglomerate, right? And even though there's no physical or tangential evidence to prove this at this time, one cannot shake the feeling that that's where the chickens come to roost, as far as why it is that I couldn't gravitate towards the Quarry the way that I was able to with supermassive games. Because I remember with Until Dawn, because I remember that was much more of an indie title, technically speaking, or more so specifically a AA title. I honestly cannot remember who published Until Dawn. I'll probably do it right now as I talk, but I know for a fact that 2K label was nowhere found either during the release of Until Dawn or even the release of the anthology series of Man of Medan, because I know that was Bandai Namco. That was Bandai Namco who was responsible for the Dark Pictures anthology. So 2K Publishing here, it would just really make a lot of things make sense. You get what I'm saying? From the abundance of licensed music, Ariana Grande has to fucking show up at the beginning, and then just a number of different things that kind of rear their ugly head here that just made me go, why is it that I'm not able to click with the Quarry the way that I was able to click with Until Dawn? Because it's the similar style of gameplay. It is tackling kind of sort of a different angle to the horror genre, to the horror genre that you can tell influences these developers. Until Dawn was, like I mentioned, kind of tackling the whole cabin in the woods type of approach, kind of like the Evil Dead and things like that. The Quarry leans more towards Friday the 13th slasher. I mean, even the logo, just look at the logo and you can instantly see, yeah, that looks like some Friday the 13th labeling type shit right there. And even the cover art, kind of harkens back to those 80s camp horror movies posters that you would find on the marquee. And that is cool, and you see that influence from beginning to end, from the corny dialogue and all that kind of stuff. However, the wedge is that as these characters say their stupid lines and their corny dialogue to each other in a way that you can't help but just go, nobody talks like that, why are they talking this way? The difference between Until Dawn is because with Until Dawn, the characters were likable from the start because of the empathetic reason for why it is that they were up in the mountains in the first place. Without going into spoilers, let's just say that there's actually an emotional reasoning as to why they're going up to the mountains to have kind of like this little shindig for what was going to be one last time. That there was this emotional connection between all the characters to make them, like I said, empathetic, to make them to look at them and be like, okay, I can kind of get you. It's kind of dumb, but there's an emotional reasoning there that makes you kind of root for these people, as shallow as they may be, especially with some of them being the archetypal, go with the phone and all that stuff. Some of these archetypes and jock type characters and, muscleheads and nerds and things like that, they're all throughout Until Dawn, and they're also found here in the Quarry as well. The difference, though, is that they're lacking that emotional weight, that emotional connection. You have a character that tells them explicit things to do and not do at the very beginning, and the first thing they do is to be like, no, fuck that. We're gonna throw our own party. There's no emotional weight to make them. In fact, again, without going into full-on spoilers, let's just say that one of the reasons for why they're there in the first place is because of one character's idiotic choice that pretty much boils down to the main driving force behind pretty much all of these characters: horniness. Quite literally horniness. Every single one of these characters is horny to an extent. It really boils down to all of them wanting to get some. And that's what leads their crusade to pretty much getting killed. And that's not to say that, there weren't some horn dogs in Until Dawn either. They were, especially the couple that go off on their own. One of them played by Brett Dalton from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But again, the reason why they came up there in the first place, even from even when they're trying to get it on, they still have a couple of lines of dialogue here or there, some of which might be optional, that they are still reminding each other about what happened a year prior. That was that, like I said, that emotional weight. And yet none of that is really found here in the Quarry. It's crazy. And like I said, I just couldn't help but feel like maybe if there was a little bit more time spent on the writing a little bit, especially when we get to the third act. The third act just rushes its way to where we get to one of the fundamental problems of the game. Because it's fundamental, because it's attacking, to an extent, one of the main gameplay aspects of the game, which is to make decisions of these characters. You get what I'm saying? To like make these weighted decisions to be like, okay, who lives and who dies. And towards the end of the game, especially in that third act, as me and the girlfriend played and took turns and flipped the controller back and forth between the two of us, there were a number of instances where the game chose to kill a character off or have a character do something that was quite virtually out of our control. Like we thought we were making a conscious decision, and the game says, well, too bad, I'm going to do this. And me and my girlfriend are just completely perplexed. Like, there was nothing earlier in the game that, showed this off, or hinted at this being a thing that made us think and be like, oh, we shouldn't do this because this might be waiting for us at the end. There was nothing like that. There was no seed planted. And so when we made a decision, we ended up getting a character killed in like the stupidest way, where we're like, okay, that was terrible writing. I mean, it's bad enough that we already had the corny dialogue, but now, like I said, even from a gameplay standpoint, an interactive experience standpoint, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. That really doesn't make sense. And then finally, after we binged through our run over the weekend, I didn't really go out of my way to look up YouTube videos, at least not yet, to see like the montage of kills or choices or whatever. But it was only a matter of time before more of the streamers that I do follow on Twitch started playing the game themselves, and I managed to catch a handful of streams in the time since then, in the time that since me and the girlfriend beat the game. And I've been watching some streams where some people made a decision that was different than mine and my girlfriend's, and yet the character still ended up in a situation that was similar to ours, where I just have to look at the situation and be like, okay, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This character would have ended up in that circumstance either way. Now I feel like I just ran through the motions. Basically, what it boils down to is that Until Dawn, I actually wanted to make my choices in that game stick by not replaying that game. if that makes any kind of sense. The same way I feel about Walking Dead Season 1 from Telltale. I don't want to replay those games because I don't, those choices that I make, I want them to feel like my choices. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want them to have that weight. So I ethically, quote unquote, refuse to replay those games because I want those characters that I made the conscious choice to keep them alive and or have them be killed off be stuck with me because that's how much I cared about the game. That's how much I respected the craftsmanship behind the game. And none of that is found here in the Quarry to the extent where I don't mind replaying the Quarry just to see what else would have happened. And to me, that's kind of a problem. That means that I didn't really care much for your game in a way where I'm willing to undo my choices and just go through a different run, or worst case scenario, go on YouTube and watch a whole hour-long video that shows all the alternate death scenes to the characters, which I have yet to even do for Until Dawn or even Man of Medan. And while I was talking, I looked it up. Sony themselves were the ones that published Until Dawn as an exclusive. So there was no third-party publisher. Bandai Namco took care of the anthology series. Here we have 2K, and I just can't shake the feeling that they had a hand in the release of this game to where the third act feels rushed. Certain things just didn't make sense for the characters that like I said, didn't have that emotional pathos, to use a big word here, as the ones did in Until Dawn. And it's very difficult to not corroborate that. Plus, it's funny because this game is technically speaking a much prettier game than Until Dawn. You could definitely see a little bit more of that next-gen money put in there, but two problems. One, even on next-gen hardware, which is the PS5 and Series X, we're still not at 60 FPS, which was a letdown and made me regret that I got the Series X version because not only is it $10 more, but I could have gotten the Xbox One version, probably gotten similar visuals, good-looking visuals. And once I was done with it, I could let my buddy Surface Assassin borrow it because he only has the Xbox One. He doesn't have the Series X or S. But being that this is the Series X version, he wouldn't be able to play it. And I regret getting this version because now that version is not going to work with him. And I was thinking to myself here that the reason why I was getting the next gen version was because A, it was the only one available at my local Best Buy, but B, I thought I was going to be able to get true native 4K 60, and it's not running at 60. And then on top of that, despite how great some of these environments look and character models resemble the actors playing them, it's super massive. Guys, I love you, but you know what? I understand that this is one of the hardest parts of the human face to get right as far as animation. But these mouths, oh my god, the mouths, they're damn near a stuff of nightmares, to be quite honestly. Especially one character in particular, Emma, I think is her name. One of she's the character who's pointing the cell phone at herself all the time and vlogging the entire time when she should be running, and she takes pictures in like the most worst scenarios. But every time she talked, she legit gives Justice League Superman, reshoot Justice League Superman, a run for his money as far as how bad her mouth looks. While we're on the subject of the character models and performances as well, despite everybody trying to do the best with the material that they got, there is, however, one standout performance that I don't know how much other people will agree, but personally, I believe to be the first awards-worthy performance, and that's Ted Raimi. Amongst all of them, Ted Raimi nails it. Like, he is a standout. Every time he's on screen, he has that kind of presence where I'm like, yeah, I want to stick around and see what he does. It may not be, you don't know what, he's got up his sleeve. It's ominous, it's creepy, but at the same time, it's complex. There's something under the surface. You could probably have a good chunk of guesses, and there's actually a possibility that one of those guesses is right. In fact, I kind of guessed something that ended up panning out as completely accurate by the game's third act twist. But as far as being able to nail that performance, Ted Raimi just hits it out of the park in a way where if he does not receive some accolades later on in the year with the Video Game Awards, DICE Awards, any kind of video game centric kind of awards, season or thing that they do towards the end of the year, I'll be genuinely a little bit upset. So As it boils down, The Quarry is definitely a perfect game if you have somebody else to play with, like I did with my girlfriend, because ultimately, I would be a bit more upset if I was playing this by myself. If in a alternate reality, I was still single and I decided to pick up The Quarry damn near at full price, which thankfully I did not pay full price. I used a $25 certificate from Best Buy, so I got it for about a third, a little over a third off, thank God. But if I was in an alternate reality where I was single and I was playing this by myself at home, I would be legitimately a bit more upset at the game. But there was some hearty entertainment value and laughs that I got out of it, going back and forth and making these decisions with the girlfriend, having a romp that way. So if you have friends or significant other, this is actually a perfect game to play with your significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, spouse, whatever. This is actually a at-home game for that sort of style, and that goes even double if you happen to be a streamer as well. If you're a streamer, even if you're single, or even better, if you have a partner and they're willing to show up on mic or on camera for your stream, that will add even much more value to the overall experience, because then you'll have your partner to deal with, and then Twitch chat to influence your decisions and go along with the ride. Watch some of these great kills, because there are some decent kills in this game, as well as the hokey dialogue, and laugh at it, go along with it. But if you're looking for something that's a little deeper underneath the skin, like you were able to get with in Until Dawn, unfortunately, you're not going to find it at The Quarry. Okay, well, that was the beefier game that I've been playing, or that I played over the weekend, and that was a very damn near last minute thing. It wasn't really, like I said, it was really boiled down to the last minute, where I was like, let me pick this up, because we're not going to get another chance like this to be able to binge through an entire game with both me and the girlfriend being off the 2 consecutive days. Like, we got to take advantage, right? So, what have I played on my own that was part of that was going to be part of the rotation anyways? So, I'm making my way. God, I hate saying that because it sounds like the goddamn song. But right now, the rotation, or rather the plan, there's these 4 games that are part of my Game Pass backlog for 2022. So I thought to myself, okay, there's 4 total, right? Let me play 2. Then I'm going to play one of the 2 Switch games that I'm looking at right here that are part of the 2022 backlog, which are Lego Star Wars or Pokemon Legends Arceus. Then I'm going to play Sifu. Then the other 2 Xbox Game Pass games that I have to get out of the way. Then the other Switch game that I didn't choose. Either Pokemon Arceus or Lego Star Wars. And then we're pretty much all cut up in time for Elden Ring. Unless like I said, the financial situation gets better, and by then I'll pick up Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, or DNF Duel, because I think by then DNF Duel will be out. Hell, Stray might be out, and I might upgrade to the extra tier so I can get Stray and a couple of other titles as part of the new PS Plus subscription service. Who knows? But let's start off with the baby steps, and one of those steps was a game called Tunic. So upon hearing that title, you might have, already heard what this game is, but for those of you who aren't, it is an indie title. It's a game called Tunic. It's very simplistic in terms of synopsis and overall look, but there's an awful lot more coming from underneath. So Tunic is an indie game, made by a company I think called Fuji, something like that. I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's pretty much a game that is paying incredible amounts of homage and respects to Zelda, to the point where the main character is a fox that's wearing a tunic that resembles pretty much Link from Legend of Zelda. I mean, he pretty much looks just like him. He almost even has the cap. He's got the sword and the shield. It's Zelda. It's a isometric Zelda looking game where you traverse across these plains, and it's kind of a dungeon crawler at times, but basically you're trying to solve puzzles and a mystery of things that are going down in the land. And that's the thing, is that it's very tough to talk about the story in Tunic because it is a little bit of a simplistic and shallow one. It's more so of a premise rather than a story where you're just trying to get this fox character, this little baby, well, not really a baby fox, he's more like a kid fox, to go on this adventure to then bring peace to the land, I guess you could say. And one of the other things that makes it difficult to kind of provide the story is because there's also this language in the game that's made out of these hieroglyphic kind of designs to the language, designed to words, and ever so often you'll get an English language word to kind of piece together the story so that you can kind of put the story together in your own thoughts, in your own mind. It, and here's the thing, I'm completely conflicted with this game because there's certain things that I think about this game are genuinely clever, and then there's a couple of others, such as that language thing, that I think are just a little bit too indie to the point where I'm probably subjective on this. I'm probably the only one that feels this way. Call me a curmudgeon. Comes off as a little pretentious, to be honest. Like, there's times where I'm like, okay, you guys probably had a minimum budget, but there's some things here and there where I'm like, this is just a little too acute. Not cute, acute, in the sense where I'm like, this is too minimalistic, too little, like, oh, you're supposed to do this yourself. You're supposed. It's like, you know how sometimes you see a movie that's like an indie movie, an indie budget movie, but it's a little too indie in the way that it's like shot, where you're like, yeah, it's an indie movie. It's using very indie music and indie cinematography and composition, where it's like, oh, it's supposed to be abstract. You're supposed to look at the deeper meaning, and I'm like, no, you're supposed to tell me a fucking story. I'm not supposed to just, there's a certain level where you can start to, get the audience to think. But when you have the audience full on making the plot on their own and you're just giving me crumbs of any kind of writing, it's like, there's an argument to be had there. And there's times where Tunic feels that way. In the way that, like I said, when you interact with certain things, whether it be character signs or the instruction manual, which I'm about to get into here, you have most of it in this hieroglyphic type of language, except for a word here and there in English. And I'm like, why are there certain words in English then? You might as well use drawings or something like that, just to kind of convey. And even then, some of the drawings, like I said, are just a little confusing. And I know that this is a very subjective take. Others might end up loving this shit. I think I've already seen some. I haven't full on watched other people's reviews because I don't want their opinions to influence mine here with this game, but I've seen some screen grabs and thumbnails and YouTube titles insinuating that the user in question or the reviewer loved the game and loved it for that reason. More power to them. I just feel like it was coming off as a little pretentious. And then we get to one of the more unique aspects about the game, which is the instruction manual. Because when you think of something obscure, trying to figure out what to do next, or try to figure out the mechanics of the game, you have to consult the main menu, your codex, what have you. This is where we get into some legitimately creative stuff that feels creative at first, and then over time started to kind of work against me. But again, I know that this is very subjective, very personal thing. Don't take it personally. But it started off creative, where you have to, this instruction manual, you actually have to go and collect. You actually collect it across the map, across the overworld, whether you're going into dungeons or you're going around the big hub world. There's these pages that you actually have to collect and are scattered throughout. And these pages make up the instruction manual. So you're learning quite literally as you go along. The problem, and here's the thing, is that this instruction manual is so beautifully crafted from a technical standpoint, from a design standpoint, the way that it's drawn and the way that it's sketched. It reminded me an awful lot of those old school guides from the 80s for, like I said, Legend of Zelda, those old school Legend of Zelda manuals. And it's just so beautiful to look at sometimes that I'm like, why have they not? I'm pretty sure it's on the horizon. I can't shake the feeling that someone like Limited Run Games or whatever is planning on making a physical version of Tunic, and with it, they're going to include the physical manual. The problem why I'm banking that they're not going to do that, though, is because one of the mechanics of the game is to gather the manual on your own inside of the game as you explore. And that's kind of a reward onto itself. The problem, though, is that some of those manual pages contain basic gameplay mechanics that if you lag on collecting these pages, there are certain mechanics you didn't know you could do until literally the second or third to last hour of the game. There I am about to beat the game, and I'm barely learning that my character can do something. Just in case, because this is part of the game, this is part of the hook. I'm not gonna spoil it what it is, but there was something that I could have done on the fucking controller from the very beginning, and I didn't know it existed until the end because I finally collected the page that said, "Hey, you know you can do this, right?" And I'm like, this would have worked hours ago, especially when Foxy, as we're gonna call him Foxy, doesn't really control all that great. And this is where we get into the deception of the game, which is, you know how earlier I said that it's a Zelda looking, not a Zelda like game, a Zelda looking game, because it's more Souls like than it is Zelda like in the way that the gameplay feels. Because this game is quite honestly the true Elden Ring. Like, the way it's all cutesy with its design and the Foxy character and even some of the very weird placed music, because here's the thing, the music is also a little bit on the indie side where it's very like, you know, it's using those synthesizers that you could probably find on GarageBand or whatever, but it doesn't fit the world. I was expecting something a bit more adventurous feeling like Legend of Zelda, and yet it feels like something that you can download through what's the not GarageBand, but the other Epidemic Sound. You could easily find on Epidemic Sound or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, this music feels kind of out of place, but again, you can only do so much with the budget money that they had on this game. Anyways, contrary to all those presentation values, the gameplay, you know, starts off modest enough, but over time, it gets to the point where you're barely dishing any damage, especially to some of these boss fights, and yet they are able to take you out on either 1 or 2 hits. And for a while there, I thought to myself, this is not cool. Because Foxy controls so sluggishly, at first at least. Like I said, as you collect more pages of this instruction booklet, you'll find out that there's certain things that you didn't know you can do, and as soon as you see some of these pictures, you're like, what the, really? You know, there's certain things that I feel like you should have learned from the very get-go, and yet you're not, because they embedded those mechanics. And like I said, on paper, this sounded awesome, this sounded unique, but execution-wise, personally, like I said, I haven't watched other people's reviews, but I feel like the execution could have used some refinement, because I really feel stupid, and not in a good way, that here I am almost about to beat the game, and yet I didn't know that this very basic thing that other games are able to do, I could have done, but I was, you know, too naive to think that, oh, you know, they didn't include it in this game, but it was there. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, just because, you know, this whole angle with the instruction booklet. Anyways, yeah, Foxy, he felt kind of sluggish. You know, he has this dodge mechanic, but even the dodge mechanic feels sluggish for the most part until the end. You know, without spoilers, at the end, they kind of give you a little something to help you out with that dodge mechanic. But outside of that, I'm like, he doesn't feel great to play or to slash. And you have these enemies that are like, you know, like you're going all over the map. And I'm like, how am I supposed to beat this? And there's no difficulty slider. Like, the difficulty that the game set itself for is that's the default difficulty. There's no easy, regular, or hard. It's the set difficulty. And, you know, plenty of other games do the same thing. A lot of Rockstar games with Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, they're that same way. And then, of course, one of the biggest discussions of the industry this year, Elden Ring, as well as Souls-like games, they don't have an easy mode. And I'm like, all right, well, this is the way that the developers intended it to. And that was my way of thinking for the longest time, playing Tunic. Until I discovered, and this is probably the only thing that I'll spoil here, until I discovered that there is a no-fail mode baked into the game that you can switch on and off from the main menu, from the accessibility tab. What this means, no fail mode, it's in the name. It means that you cannot die. You take damage, but right before your health runs out, it stops, and you just don't die. So even though there was no difficulty slider, they actually do include a function that if you want to just breeze through the story, you could turn this mode on and you don't die. You still have to like beat bosses and such. Doesn't, decrease the amount of damage or the AI behind the enemies, or, it doesn't alter any of that. The only difference is that you just don't die. So you can stay in the fight. And to be honest, discovering this made me think that maybe the developers knew how sluggish Fox felt, and the fact that they couldn't include a difficulty slider. I personally would have taken the difficulty slider, because then at least I can kind of strike a balance that fits me. Whereas here, it really is like I'm playing through the whole game, with the Rainbow Star from Super Mario Brothers, the star power up. It's basically like you're switching that on. And there have been sequences where I'm like, I had to turn it on because, like my buddy Surface Assassin likes to say, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. And there's times where it felt kind of cool dishing out attacks, especially as you proceed in the game and you earn different ways to attack, whether it be with a sword or with a wand or with this game's equivalent of a hook shot. I'm like, okay, it does feel kind of cool to dish out these effects towards, or these attacks towards certain specific enemies. But there were a plethora of pockets in the game, especially in the third actish or so, where I'm like, yeah, I'm turning this on. There's physically no way with the speed that at first I thought Foxy controlled, and the way that he dodged and all that stuff, that just felt so sluggish and uncomfortable to me that it just felt unfair. I was like, in the difference between this, at first I thought that the differences between this and Elden Ring is that in Elden Ring you could swap out different weapons for different, class attributes and things like that. Let's just say, again, trying not to spoil too much, but as I collected more pages of the instruction booklet, I learned that there are some things that can kind of help Foxy be a little bit better, as far as how much damage he deals out, how much defense, how much more he can recover in health when he drinks potions, etc. And I'm like, that's cool and all, but like I said, on paper, this whole instruction booklet thing sounded cool at first, but now I'm like, I should have known this from the beginning, and I probably would have never turned on that function, that no fail mode function. Now I feel kind of cheated out of this experience. And sure, you can argue that, hey, David, you can replay the game. There's even a new game plus option at the end, but oh my god, I was just so jaded by the end of the credits, especially after learning that there's two endings, and one of them is the bad ending, and the bad ending is pretty much the default ending. Let's just say that the way this game ends is just so sour, and it doesn't make sense in the context. Like I said, if you play the game, sorry, I just bumped the mic, but if you play the game, it ends in a downer sort of way that it didn't need to be. I'm like, there's not enough story here, and there's not enough to justify this game ending in such a downer kind of way. And then I looked it up, and it says, oh, that was... Even though that's the default ending, it's also known as the bad ending. If you want the good, more optimistic ending, you're going to have to go and collect all 28 pages of the manual, and you're going to have to go and liberate these 10 fairies. And to liberate these 10 fairies, you need to go across the map and, basically, in order to get a much more satisfying ending, you have to go do it. You have to go and pretty much do all the stuff that you thought this entire time was optional is pretty much not optional. The collectible shit that with every game I look at, I go, oh, that's optional. I'll do it as I go along. Turns out I have to go back and grab all that if I want the true definitive ending. Yeah, I YouTube that shit. Make no mistake, I went on YouTube. I mean, no. And I saw some of these things that you have to do in order to collect some of these pages, and how to unlock these different puzzles, and how to liberate these fairies that I didn't even know were part of the gameplay or part of the game overall, and what you have to do that I would have otherwise never figured out, because apparently you have to, pretty much do the Konami code, but like a variation of the Konami code on the map that there's no semblance of that whatsoever, and you have to look at the manual and look at these very obscure, these very abstract drawings in the manual that I'm like, I would have never guessed it. I never would have guessed that it would have meant this thing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm over. I'm about to hit 31 years old. I physically do not have time or the patience for this anymore. And I just looked up that other ending. I looked up that other ending. I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. And so I'm so. This is one of the more conflict out of all the AAA games that have been released in 2022 and all the games that have been a topic of discussion and whatnot. Tunic, out of all of them, has been the most polarizing for me, where there's a lot of things about it that I can respect, and I appreciate the creativity that looked good on paper, but then there were others where I'm like, I'm not vibing with this. And at first, I was about to quit the game, and if it wasn't for being able to discover that certain things could be swapped out to help the experience be a little bit more better, and to turn on the no fail mode on and be like, well, technically speaking, I could breeze through the game so I can at least see the story kind of unfold, which to me didn't even have that great of a payoff. I was like, okay, this was an effort. This was an indie studio effort, but here's to hoping that their sophomore or their next project is a little bit better polished, because there was some great premise here, but the execution, personally, I felt needed some work. Okay, so for this next segment, I will have to tell you guys, you might hear, I don't know how well, I'm not monitoring the audio right now, unfortunately. I know that that's a kind of a big no-no for podcasters. I apologize, but I'm just going to apologize in advance in the event that you guys can hear like a fan whirring in the background, because now I have my laptop closer to my mic, because I'm going to need to reference some material for the next segment and the last segment of this podcast, this episode, since it's already a little bit on the long side. But the reason why is because I finally want to break down these events that have been happening lately as far as gaming news, gaming reveals, and just the overall nature of what's going on right now in the industry, especially after specifically the Summer Games Fest, Xbox and Bethesda Showcase, and the Capcom Showcase on Monday. Now, I know that right now, probably by the time you hear this, there's going to be a couple of other things that have gone down, specifically the Dragon's Dogma video for the 10th anniversary of that game, as well as the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary stream. Wait for those breakdowns and my take on those things next week. I'm going to go ahead and pivot those. I know I could have prolonged the podcast a little longer to cover those, but honestly, I want to have some material for next week's episode. Next week's episode of the podcast, as well as the talk about the other episode of Obi-Wan, because I'm pretty sure that by the time that this airs, the next episode of Obi-Wan and next episode of Ms. Marvel is already going to be out there. So look for those reviews on next week's podcast. I know it's going to be a little out of date slightly, but we got some material to talk about then. There'll be some material then. So let's go ahead. And here's the thing. There's just so much here that I really don't want to go through every single game. I was trying to figure out different ways, different avenues of how I would be able to tackle these three specific conventions, and to talk about the games that were revealed, the stuff that was talked about, the stuff that was not talked about. Like I said, most of you who are probably in the know of this industry could probably have or surmise exactly what went down, what didn't go down, what's your take, whose convention was, whose showcase was trash versus whose was good, etc., etc. And frankly, it has gotten to the point where it's become a little bit exhausting in a way where it's like, Jesus, it's become a little exhausting to be like, well, what can we expect from these showcases? Which one demanded more versus which one gets the pass as far as what they could have gotten revealed, etc., etc. It's like, oh my God. Anyways, let's tackle Summer Games Fest first, as I scroll through the list of everything that was pretty much announced. Now, like I said, I really don't want to break down. I just want to cover like the really important stuff, really, right? So when it comes to Summer Games Fest, I think we can all argue that the biggest story that came out of Summer Games Fest is the one that wasn't really so much to do with the show, as it was leaked quite literally hours before the event itself, which was the Last of Us remake, which was being buzzed about for quite some time, but finally was made official via the Summer Games Fest reveal, with Neil Druckmann taking the stage, with Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson being on stage as well, talking to them about it. And they pretty much revealed that the remake is A legit thing built from the ground up on PS5, coming in September with a PC version on the way. How do I feel about this? I don't care. I'm not like boycotting it. I'm not angry, but right now I have very little desire to actually revisit The Last of Us, to be honest. Even if it's a remake. I know I've seen the screen shots, the comparisons, the side by side comparisons of how it looks different from it definitely looks like a remake. It really does. But at the same time, again, that gap is just so small compared to other remakes like Final Fantasy VII that it's very tough for me to warrant it, especially at the full $70. I'm like, nah, I'd rather put that $70 to something that's authentically brand new. That's a brand new game, a brand new IP. Whether it be a brand new game, like in the sense of hell, I can't believe I'm saying this, but even though this might end up, actually, you know what? No, I take it back. I was this close to saying I would rather put the $70 towards Gotham Knights than to do it towards Last of Us remake. Only because it's Last of Us, it's a remake of The Last of Us. I've already played the first one. I know how it's gonna go down. Yes, it's gonna have refined controls. Yes, it's an overhaul from a graphical standpoint because they're brand new assets. But it's the same performances, the same voice acting, and the same story. And it's like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm going through a little bit of Last of Us fatigue, which was not made better by uh, Neil Druckmann confirming that a multiplayer game based on The Last of Us is coming, that it has a story mode built within it, and they showed this concept art that pretty much showed these two people overlooking what looks to be like a street, but it's kind of like on the coastline of San Francisco, but it's all torn away and ravaged by the post-apocalyptic world of The Last of Us. But a lot of people are theorizing that it may be a battle royale, or it may be pretty much a much more blown out version of factions. We shall see. But apparently they built it as something that was akin to factions, but it grew and it got bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where it could be released as a standalone. We shall see, because this. He made it sound like this is a long way down. And then along with it, they also showcased a screenshot of the Last of Us HBO show. So there's just so much Last of Us that I'm like, okay, none of it inherently looks bad, but I'm just feeling a little bit of that fatigue. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a little bit of too much going on right there that I'm like, I don't care. And to have the show, the Summer Games Fest, be closed out this way, I was like, it is what it is. It is a name brand drop as far as news is concerned, but otherwise, hey, at least I found the return of Guile for Street Fighter 6 to be a little bit more interesting. I mean, it's a character that we were expecting to have in Street Fighter 6, but to see his moveset be fully realized in the RE engine with his brand new look, he still has the traditional hair with the comb, but he's got a goatee this time and all that cool stuff. It's like, okay, I can see how the fighting game community probably saw this little reveal and thought, okay, that looks pretty awesome. Aliens Dark Descent, a new Alien game, which had a decent CG trailer, but then the gameplay at the end showed what looked to be a top-down isometric kind of twin-stick shooter that I'm like, all right, if that's coming to Game Pass, maybe I'll try it out, but otherwise, whatever's. One of the bigger showcases to me, however, was Callisto Protocol, an actual slice of gameplay that looks very reminiscent of Dead Space. It looks very much embedded into the horror genre. It looks a little too much like Dead Space, some would argue, but it still feels like a new IP. You can tell that everybody who shared that strong DNA with the Dead Space mythology, or the Dead Space lineage, I should say, with this new team, with this new developer, you can tell that they love the survival horror genre, and seeing the gory after effects of it, along with how the gameplay actually plays out, how it feels with the gravity gun and all these different facets. I'm like, yes, they were able to show enough of Callisto Protocol that I'm like, yeah, this honestly, aside from God of War Ragnarok, which I'm still having my slight apprehensions of, I would say this is my next day one. You know what I'm saying? Like the one where I'm like, I either need to wrap up whatever it is that I'm playing, or everything else needs to take a backseat until I'm done with Callisto Protocol come December 2nd. Because what they showed of gameplay was awesome. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Don't care. Next. New Layers of Fear game. Okay, interesting, but it's made by Bloober, and Bloober's been kind of hit or miss with some of their horror games. Kind of hit and miss within their games, you know what I'm saying? Like where all of their games have been kind of meh quality, where there's some good things about it and some bad things about it. Marvel Midnight Suns got a trailer that reveals Spider-Man being one of the characters, which doesn't really make sense because in the comics, Midnight Suns had nothing to do with Spider-Man, but he's a popular character. He's taking off right now. Everybody's got Spider-Mania, so it was a no-brainer that they would put him in Midnight Suns. But we finally get a release date for the game, October 7th. We'll see how it goes down because they say it's an XCOM-style game, but it also has to deal with a card-based system. So I'm going to have to see a little bit more of that gameplay to see if it's enticing enough. If not, I might have to wait on it. Gotham Knights got a Nightwing gameplay trailer. I did actually a full breakdown of this, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, on the official niche channel since it is Batman-related. Personally, I thought this trailer was kind of a waste of time because it's not only a short trailer, it's only a minute and a half that uses a lot of cinematic angles for the gameplay, so you don't really see a proper look at the gameplay, but it's a look at a character that we've already seen of, Nightwing. You know, with that Nightwing and Red Hood breakdown. I was really hoping that here they were going to showcase Robin and Batgirl. You know what I'm saying? Like a full 10 to 15 minute sequence of gameplay of how those two other characters play out, and instead they chose not to do that. I thought it was over and done with. It was like a minute and a half trailer. I was like, well, what was the point of that? Saints Row gets a boss factory mode, which is pretty much the customizer. We really are in an age where the customizer is released as a separate thing. Yeah, it's free, but you know, why is that an advertising hook? You know what I'm saying? Like that to me makes me even more worried about the game than I already was, and I was already not caring for it. Casey Jones is now going to be a playable character on the new Shredder's Revenge TMNT game, which I think is out now by the time you listen to this. So for those of you who are excited about the game, there was some more additional stuff there for that. Cuphead got a new look at the DLC, or the Delicious Last Course. Neon White got a June 16th release date. Hey, look at that. That's today, actually. So it's officially out, and I hear a lot of reviews are actually pretty decent. Humankind coming to console. Yeah, like I said, I'm skipping ahead a little bit because a lot of stuff that just looked kind of meh, pretty, whatever. Witchfire makes a return after being announced at the 2017 Game Awards. To be honest, I didn't even know that this game existed. Fort Solace looks pretty interesting. It features Troy Baker and Roger Clark. So that's going to be pretty interesting from an acting standpoint, but it pretty much looks like a psychological version of Dead Space. So it has less to do with monsters and more about what it is like to be stuck out in outer space, but it is an indie game. It was pretty much the game that everybody looked at and went, yeah, indie games are starting to legitimately rival AAA stuff as far as the quality, as far as the look of the game, where you look at the game and you go, this doesn't look indie, and yet it technically is as far as like the developer and the money behind it, and that's where we're at as far as technology is concerned, and that's pretty dope. It really is. Like the way that these characters look inside of this Fort Solace game, and this is an indie game. Oh yeah. Routine got re-revealed with a new kind of look at the monsters and stuff. It was a very brief teaser just to let us know that the game is still in effect. A lot of space horror going all throughout Summer's Games Fest, which is pretty decent. I just feel like within the confines of the show, I felt like it was a little bit redundant. So a lot of RTSs like Stormgate is coming. And then as I'm going down the list here, I remembered they fucking trolled us with that goddamn Goat Simulator 3 trailer. That was definitely making fun of Dead Island 2, because we all know that Dead Island 2 is pretty much dead. But it started off with the shots, and I'm like, oh shit, Dead Island 2. And then when I noticed the art style, two things happened in my brain. I'm like, this is either not Dead Island 2 and they're just making fun of it, or it really is Dead Island 2, but they literally had to go to a different developer and a different art style to afford to make this game possible, and which I was dreading. I was legitimately dreading, like, okay, you might as well cancel this shit. I'm sorry. And thankfully, as soon as that first goat popped up, actually, it wasn't even the goat. It was the girl that gets goated there at the beginning, because in the original Dead Island 2 trailer, that girl flips off the guy with the middle finger. In this trailer, she gives the thumbs down, and as soon as I saw the thumbs down being changed to that from the middle finger, I'm like, I don't think this is Dead Island. Otherwise, they would have kept that. They're not afraid to show inappropriate stuff at this Game Fest, as far as much more mature stuff like language, gore, violence, etc. It's a rated E through M show, so to speak. So to have it be thumbs down, I'm like, I don't think this is. And as soon as I was formulating that thought in my head, the goat shows up. I'm like, oh, you fuckers. Oh my god, how could you? And yeah, it's Goat Simulator 3. Now, I'm also, along with everybody, where the hell was Goat Simulator 2? Did they skip it? Is that part of the gag? Is that part of the joke, I guess? I'm assuming, because oh yeah, it says right here in the article, actually, before you go check, there is no Goat Simulator 2. So are they counting the DLC? I guess I don't know. Some Warhammer stuff was shown off. Some other indie stuff like the High Water game, which looks pretty interesting. But if it's coming to Game Pass, it's probably the only way I'm probably gonna play it, to be honest. One Piece game was shown off. One Piece Odyssey. Nightingale was looked at a little bit more. Metal Hellsinger, which is that rhythm game focusing on heavy metal music, which looks kind of neat, but I'm scared that it's one of those games that is probably fun for like 30 minutes, and then afterwards you're like, well, I can't shoot on my own volition. I have to go by the song, and after a little while, you get kind of tired of listening to the same music. Well, some people, not everybody, but I'm one of those people where after about 20, 25 minutes, I either need to change up the genre or turn up the music. Like, I'm done. I either need to switch to like a podcast or something else to vary it up, and that's what makes me nervous about that game. And to close things off here, I know that this wasn't the order of all these reveals here. I'm just going down the article over here on IGN of everything that was shown at the Summer Games Fest. But at the very end here is a genuinely interesting game. Is a 2.5D indie side-scrolling game called American Arcadia, which pretty much looks like a Bioshock-ish kind of nature, where there's like this perfect Tomorrowland looking kind of place, but there's this dude that's under constant surveillance, and he finds out that they're all under surveillance, so he's trying to break out, and they're trying to contain him, but he's getting help. It sounds a little been there, done that with the story, but the way it's being told with this charming art style, I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool, and I do believe this one is for sure coming to Game Pass, so I'll check that out when it drops. So that looked pretty interesting, but overall, Summer's Games Fest, by itself, it wasn't bad, but there was definitely lacking some legitimate. It was an awful lot of interesting. There was more interesting. Like, there was a 55% really interesting and neat looking stuff versus the other 45%, which was a combination of some moments of hype, like Callisto Protocol, and then other stuff that's just kind of like, I don't care. Like, it's not terrible, but I personally just did not care for some of those things. So, a couple of days later, we then got the Xbox Bethesda Game Showcase, which I may need to remind you was being hyped up for, I want to say, a little over a month. Like, when Xbox announced that this was happening on June 12th, when was that? Like, May something. It was like the beginning of May. So, they were hyping this up and telling people to tune in for over a month and a half, saying that this was a 90-minute showcase. Tune in. This is the thing that was set up for E3. All right, guys, what you got? Yeah. Even I have to agree that this was not the business. I can't bring myself to say it was full on trash, but it got kind of close. It got kind of close because the best way that I can summarize the Xbox Bethesda Game Showcase from Sunday morning, which I tuned into a little late. I woke up at 10:30 and immediately pulled out my phone and started watching. So I was about 30 minutes late, and yet I still felt like I didn't really miss much when I tuned in. And, when I tuned in, I didn't even tune into the stream by itself. I tuned into another streamer's stream, and a lot of that chat, and even the streamer himself, Gamer2323, was like, yeah, this is kind of trash so far. I was like, oh no, is it really? And playing back the first 30 minutes that I missed a little later, and such, I was like, man, yeah, it really wasn't all that great. And to give it some context, it wasn't great if this was what they had set up for the E3 week. You get what I'm saying? If this was showcased any other time in the month, or if this was like a surprise showcase where they announced it the week that they showed it, you know what I'm saying? Like, if on Monday they went on Twitter and said, hey guys, on Thursday we're gonna have a showcase, see you then, 3 days, instead of promoting it and hamming it up for like a month. And on the week that we would have had E3 no less, they probably would have been better off. But instead, that's why they got all the flack, because the show opened with a gameplay look at Redfall, and the gameplay itself didn't look all that great. It didn't look terrible, but there was just nothing about it that made me go, yeah, the delay is gonna be worth it. I mean, maybe it will be later down the line, but what they were shown off, it justified the delay. It did, but at the same time, it didn't really invoke anything to subsequently give me some hype. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was nothing about it that made me go, oh yeah, this is Bethesda, this is Arcane Studios, even though it's technically Arcane Austin, not Arcane Leon. There was nothing about it that made me go, yes, this is day one on Game Pass. I mean, Game Pass, a little bit less of a risk there, since I am a Game Pass subscriber, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, I'll see it when I'll see it, and it's 2023, so for now, it's very far back in my head. It really, really is. And for people who have been holding out so much hope for Hollow Knight Silksong, which has become the stuff of legend, I feel now, we got a new trailer that showcased some more gameplay. It's coming to Game Pass, so I'll be able to try it out. Still no date, though. So a lot of the Nintendo crowd on Twitter lit up going, oh my god, Silksong, and then they were like, there's still no. And I feel like this thing has been in development hell for quite some time, so yeah, I'm not gonna lie, my heart kind of goes out to you guys. I'm sorry. And then, I don't know, I'm more than likely jumping back and forth here. I'm actually going up and down the article over at Polygon, but a lot of DLC stuff was announced to where I'm like, really, guys? This is the DLC showcase at this point, where we have Riot Games bringing a lot of League of Legends spin-offs and spiritual successors and things like Valorant, Teamfight Tactics, Runeterra, Wild Rift stuff coming to Game Pass. It's kind of decent. But, stuff is coming to Fallout 76. Forza Horizon 5 is getting another Hot Wheels expansion. Like so many different like little spin-offs and added DLCs and stuff like that I'm like, all right, what the hell is going on? Speaking of Forza, the new Motorsport got announced, even though we didn't get a number, which is kind of interesting because I think at this point they're at what, 9 or 8? No, we're at 9. No, 8. Because I think the last one was 7. A new look at Plague Tale Requiem was given, which was pretty neat. Except still no date. They're still adamant that's coming out this year, but no date. And until we get a date, much like with God of War Ragnarok, I'm honestly leaning towards the camp of believing that's not coming out this year, because this sounds like you guys are not all that confident in yourselves to give it a date, which is fine. Just be transparent about it and delay it if that's going to be the case. The creator of Rick and Morty's, Justin Roiland's got a new game called High on Life. Definitely looks like something you need to be high for, but it looks creative nonetheless. I know it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it's in there. One of the first big things that made people kind of stop and go, oh, wait, hold on. Overwatch 2 got an October 4th release date, and it's going free to play. Which makes sense, because everybody is thoroughly believing that this is not so much Overwatch 2 as it is Overwatch 1.5. With what they've done, with what they played in the alpha, it's like, yeah. This is probably... Now, on the other hand, to play devil's advocate, people would argue that this also could potentially squander the game in a way and riddle it with like microtransactions, which I think recently I read something that they are bringing a store and a battle pass to it. Yeah, but I mean, as long as they can balance it out and make the grind, like I said, balanced in a way where it's not a Halo Infinite situation, then it can maybe work. As well as the introduction of a new hero character called Junker Queen. Looks interesting. Ara History Untold, which is the new Civilization kind of looking game. More DLC coming to Elder Scrolls Online. I'm telling you, a lot of like DLC kind of stuff. Arc 2 got delayed to 2023. Yes, the game with Vin Diesel. Family. Scorn got a release date, October 22nd, which is pretty much every Geiger fan's dream, or anybody with a very strong fetish towards this kind of thing. Flintlock Siege of Dawn got a gameplay trailer, except along with this gameplay trailer, I think they officially now announced that it's coming to 2023. I feel like this is a delay because the last time I heard of this game, it was labeled for 2022. So I think now we're officially under the guise that it's 2023. So I'm going to label that as a delay. Minecraft is getting a different spin-off called Minecraft Legends. It's a strategy spin-off. Gotta be honest, don't care. Lightyear Frontier is like a mech simulator, except it's like it's a farming simulator, but with mechs. Okay, sure. Gunfire Reborn, which is like this cartoony kind of shooter with animal characters. Last Case of Benedict Fox is like a detective game with demons, but it looks kind of interesting. I will admit, Dusk Falls definitely feels like a proper Game Pass game because it looks like it looks like it looks like a Telltale game or even a Supermassive game, like I was talking about before, except with a lot less budget behind it because all they did was just take screenshots of people in a studio and then kind of paint over them and still create still images out of them and montage them together. But if they're able to deliver on a harrowing story, I can get behind it. It launches on July 19th, so it's not too far away. We'll see how that goes. Naraka Blade Point is coming to Game Pass, which is like this kind of because it was already out for PC, but it's like this kind of like sword hack and slash kind of online game, I believe, from what I can remember it being. Pentiment looks interesting. It's like a 16th century Bavaria game from Obsidian, actually. Some more DLC. Grounded is leaving the preview early access or whatever, so it's finally becoming a game, I guess you could say. Diablo 4 got a showcase of a new class called the Necromancer, as well as gameplay reveal. It legitimately looks like the prettiest Diablo game, like to the point where I'm like, I think I might have to be there day one, but that day one's not coming until next year. Sea of Thieves is getting a look at Season 7. I'm telling you guys, see, this now you're starting to hear it. You're starting to hear why a lot of people are looking at this conference and going, what the hell is this? The Persona games are coming to Game Pass, which is pretty interesting, especially Persona 4 Golden, because I don't know how much I can rely on my Vita to play Persona 4 Golden, because after a while I'm like, I need to be locked within this game, so I might have to be stationary, as well as Persona 5 Royale, Persona 3 Portable. Those are all coming and such, as well as a game called Wo Long Fallen Dynasty, which actually does look pretty interesting from Team Ninja, so that looks pretty decent, but it's probably not going to come until like 2023 or possibly even 2024. But it is coming to Game Pass. Cocoon from the creators of Limbo and Inside, so that one is actually going to be a little bit on the interesting side, but again, it's an indie game. It's nothing harrowing. This might as well have been an indie showcase. If it wasn't for presentations such as Hideo Kojima, just to say that they come in. Oh my god. Hideo Kojima comes on screen. Everybody jizzes the pants just for Hideo Kojima to pretty much say, hey guys, I got a new coworker. And that's it. Saying that he's working on a new game, as all game developers do, and then butt out. And that's it. I'm like, okay, bye. And everybody else just like, oh my god, the god himself, Hideo Kojima. He's on screen right now. Okay, guys, come on. Anyways, to cap off the show, a look at Starfield. We finally got gameplay of Starfield. And yeah, it looks alright. I'm right there with a lot of people that the gameplay itself, it looks okay. You know, it doesn't look terrible, but it doesn't look anything special. Much like with Redfall, I can see why they delayed it. An awful lot of it just looks unspectacular. Some interesting things, especially customizing the ship. I know I'm going to go to town on that. Being able to fly through different planets, even though you're not able to, from what I hear, go from the surface of the planet to a different planet in one go. You have to wait for like load screens or whatever. Your character's not going to be able to talk, but you are going to be able to interact with all these different NPCs and have these dialogue options and side quests, different factions, etc. The characters themselves look a little dead in the eyes, but at least it looks like a Bethesda game. It really does, set in space. I know that people have already been making the No Man's Sky comparisons, and I can definitely see it. For a little while, I thought, that's going a little far because it just looks like a standard third-person space game. Until they got to the laser mining tool, where it shoots the laser and it kind of like scratches off a mineral and your character harvests it. That was the moment where I was like, ooh, okay, never mind. This is No Man's Sky, only from a Bethesda budget or Bethesda look. Um, and people are making the arguments that, yeah, No Man's Sky is now a great game, but I'm like, are we really going to normalize games to be at the beginning and then get better over time? Like some of us don't have that time. If you're not, there from the get go, you know, that's an awful lot of time to invest in a product and a company that some of us just don't have time for that. We're gonna go towards, thankfully this is coming to Game Pass, so a little less risk in that investment. But for those who aren't, they're gonna take their $60 or $70 elsewhere. And right now, not a lot of that is coming from Starfield. It's great to see that the delay is happening. I will probably put on my tinfoil hat and say that we should look a little closely at the fact that the end shows coming in 2023 instead of spring of 2023. I don't know if I'm alone in that, but I feel like before they used to say spring 2023 when it got delayed, and now they're just saying 2023. There's no spring in front of it. And I'm like, is that their subtle way of saying that they might not even hit the spring? We might have to wait a full year from when it was originally dated in November to then get in the fall and the holiday of 2023. We shall see, especially with a huge promise like being able to visit, what did they say, 1,100 or 1,000 planets or something like that? Todd Howard coming forward saying, you can do this, you can do that. And then, of course, the memes started to flood the internet with, tell me lies, Todd, tell me sweet little lies. I don't know. There was some interesting stuff out of the Starfield gameplay, but other things also looked quite rough, looked quite underwhelming that, I don't see this as being like a killer app for the Xbox. It doesn't look like anything that needs to be exclusive to Xbox. It could have been multiplat, like prior Bethesda games. That I don't know. I don't know what it is that they're doing, but I'm really, really hoping that they're strategizing in a way where they can hopefully take advantage of this delay in full force instead of just kind of, what was the word? Spinning the wheels, so to speak. And then the last showcase I want to talk about here is this goddamn Capcom showcase. And I call it the goddamn Capcom showcase because, in my opinion, it was the worst one. It really was the worst one. It was 30 minutes. Most of it was bloat, talking about a game that looks kind of bad, Exoprimal. Spending the first 10 minutes just talking about a game that's already been out with just a bunch of update shit for Monster Hunter Rise. Not to shit on anyone's parade with Monster Hunter Rise. I know that it has a dedicated fan base. They're getting DLC, they're getting new monsters, stuff like that. I'm happy for you guys, but that shouldn't have been 10 minutes. That should have been like a quick 5-minute thing. And there's so many moments during those first 10 minutes. I was like, you guys are stretching this. I know for a fact you guys are stretching this. What the hell are you doing? And then it gets to the Exoprimal stuff. And then for a little while, they then tackled the Dragon's Dogma 10th anniversary, which did get some people hyped because there's a lot of people that believe that game requires a sequel. It's got this dedicated base that got hyped to see that Capcom was acknowledging Dragon's Dogma, only for the guy in the jersey to just be like, hey, tune in on Thursday, which by now you guys would probably have seen that video. But tune in on Thursday, and then we'll talk about it more. And people are just like, really? Like, really? That's it? And they did talk a little bit more about Street Fighter 6, but it just wasn't enough. They showed a little bit more of the gameplay, a few of the modes, but they just reiterated, to be honest. A lot of that 35 minute presentation from Capcom was just fluff. It wasn't until almost the end that they talked about Resident Evil that, okay, there was a little bit more to chew on. Because the Resident Evil 8 stuff, that hefty pack of DLC that's coming by, October 28th? I was like, okay, that's actually kind of legit. Because not only are we getting a third-person mode, and we're getting some added little perks for mercenaries that lets you pretty much play as the villains as Mommy D and Heisenberg, especially, it's funny because everybody's like, "Oh my god, you get to play as Mommy D." Eh, I would rather look at Mommy D from down below. But in terms of being able to play as one of the villains, Heisenberg with his little Magneto effect, I'm like, yes, that should be pretty cool in Mercenaries. And then the third person mode, funny enough, you still can't see Ethan's face even in third person mode, but it should make the original core game feel like a brand new game, so that should be pretty interesting if they can play it right. But the piece of the resistance of the Resident Evil 8 DLC, which is arguably going to be paid for, you have to pay for it, but honestly, there's enough going down in what they're calling here the gold edition that I look at and I go, you know what? I think actually might be kind of worth it, especially for this last piece alone, which is going to be a third-person story DLC centered around Rose. Now, admittingly, I personally feel like the trailer that they showed during this event was a little really heavy on the spoiler side. Like, heavy enough that if you have not played Resident Evil Village by this point, too bad, because this trailer full on spoiled the ending of Resident Evil Village. So I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but you play as a character Rose that's very integral to the story, enough that watching this and seeing the reveal go down that they are pretty much making a DLC story on her that's probably going to be, because it's DLC, I would assume it's probably going to be around the realm of like 3 or 4, maybe 5 hours. And no, not 5 hours. I think 5 hours might be pushing it. 3 or 4 hours. It's like, okay, it's pretty interesting coming a year after the release of the game, about a year and a half-ish. But at the same time, there was enough theorization and speculation as far as where her story was going to go and her connections to Resident Evil Village that I personally would have wished a little better for her to have been in her own game. Like, for her story to pretty much be Resident Evil 9 and for her to be the main character. Whether it be first person or third person, I think I would have been indifferent to that. I would have taken either one. But her overall arcing story is like, I feel like that should have been 9. And then as soon as I saw her showing up in the original castle from Village, the Demetrius Castle, and going back to where that story took place, that's where I was like, okay, well, it's most definitely going to be a DLC. There's going to be some compartmentalized versions of the castle that you're going to have to go into, which means that's going to feel... what I can only speculate, especially from the little bits that I saw in the trailer, that it's going to be a bit more closed off than the core game, and because of that, it's going to be DLC length, like 3 to 4-ish hours. But there's enough, if it's priced right, that combined with, like I said, new mercenary modes, new the third-person mode for the core game, I'm kind of like, you know what, there's actually enough value in this package that I might, depending on where I'm at, like I said, financially, I might just pull the trigger. This is coming on October 28th. On the same day, they're finally going to drop that reverse multiplayer mode, which I technically should have access to because I own Resident Evil Village, so I should be able to access it. We shall see if that comes to fruition. And then before, I know they announced this before, this was technically the last announcement of the Capcom event, but right before they did, before I forget, they did announce that those long-rumored next-gen updates for Resident Evil 2, 3, and 7 are officially out. They're actually out now. They were announced and released on the day of the Capcom event. And so right now, for those of you who have a PS5 or Series X and have an original copy of Resident Evil 2 Remake, RE3 Remake, or Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, you should be able to pop it in and get all that sweet ray tracing, 4K 60, the works. So that's pretty dope, especially if you have not played the game. And even then, I'd say that this is probably a really good excuse to go through either the B-sides of Leon and Claire in Resident Evil 2 Remake. I would say that that's probably the biggest argument that I can come up with for replaying those games, because I generally do want to go through those reruns for the B-sides of the story. Otherwise, that was the ending of the Capcom event, and that was arguably the best part. Oh, wait! No, it isn't, because we also got a quote-unquote look, right when I think, okay, they ended it on a good note, they show us the Resident Evil 4 remake that was announced some time ago. And I say that lightly, because Jesus Christ, this is, and I remember seeing some people saying this in the chat when I was watching this live, that it really does feel sometimes like Capcom just likes to troll. They really do just like to troll their fucking audience. They really do. Because they're like, hey, we're going to show Resident Evil 4 Remake now. By playing the same trailer from the State of Play. It's the exact same trailer. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not the exact same trailer. There's 2 new shots at the end that show Leon's face and show Leon looking around. And then they're like, oh yeah, we're going to show gameplay. And by gameplay, I mean 10 seconds of Leon walking with his gun and revealing something that I think they're treating it like a big deal. And I'm over here going like, yeah, you should be doing this. All right, you guys are sounding really, on your high horse right here saying, look what we're doing. And I'm like, no, you should be doing, congratulations for doing what the remake should be doing as far as its job, its existence is fucking concerned. You're able to aim and move at the same time. Something that right now people are like, oh my God, you can finally do that in RE4. And I'm over here going, that was one of the problems with RE4. It's one of the reasons for why I don't consider RE4 to be one of the best games of all time, in my opinion. Like, a lot of people consider RE4 to be a near perfect game. I'm over here going, not being able to aim and shoot at the same time to me, honestly, is a big no. It's like, I could not get behind that game, behind the acclaim that it got. And so to see them being like, oh yeah, we're bringing that, something that has been in games for the past decade and a half, to Resident Evil 4 remake, and everyone going, oh my God, yes. I'm like, it's like, it's pretty much like praising people that are in the workspace for doing what their job description says that they should be doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, isn't that kind of sad? I'm sorry. That's just how the way I see it. And to make matters, like I said, a little bit more frustrating, they show this in like 10 seconds amount of gameplay, and that's it. And then it fades out, and the show's over. I'm like, what was that? What you whatever. I know that later there's gonna be more coming down the pipeline, especially as we get like closer to Halloween. They're probably gonna showcase a little bit more of the gameplay, and I do have hopes that maybe it'll be as polished and as thrilling and as exciting as the RE2 remake gameplay, because this is that same team. It's the same team that worked on RE2 remake, not the same team that worked on RE3 remake, which is a huge relief to hear. But the way it was presented here by Capcom, it just screams, I don't know, it just doesn't paint Capcom in a good light, in my opinion. And with this showcase overall, for 30 minutes of our time, I thank God it was 30 minutes and not like a full-blown hour, because now I'm thinking to myself, you guys, this could have been a post. This could have been a tweet. This could have been a blog post. It could have been like one of those things. Because even though there was some good stuff to chew on the Resident Evil side of things, everything else, I was like, that could have been a post. So, therefore, I dub Capcom's showcase, to be perfectly blunt, the worst showcase out of these 3. And we have plenty of more to talk about as the week kind of unfolds here with the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary showcase. That Dragon's Dogma thing that they were teasing, we're going to finally get a full-blown video as to what that's all about. There's rumors going around that a Nintendo Direct might be on the horizon. We shall see. But for the time being, that's all I wanted to really disclose on the showcases. It's looking a little dry as far as announcements. Games themselves are doing pretty well, but as far as announcements, I feel like now we're getting that stronger lull of things to really talk about and announce because of COVID, because of the way that two things. Not only COVID, but also the war in Ukraine. I think it's like stressing a lot of things out, and because of that, the announcements are kind of taking a backseat. So what is a gamer to do but to just go back to our backlog? It's frustrating, but ultimately all that we can really do right now is wait for hopefully a much better game than originally conceived. And while we wait, just try to get some more stuff out of my backlog, because that's definitely what I'll be doing. In the meantime, though, thank you guys for tuning in to episode 5 of the podcast. Thank you for listening. I'll see you guys on the next weekend. In the meantime, though, you guys know where to find me on the social media platforms. You can find links in the description, or at me at DarkspiderDavid on Twitter, on Instagram. Check out the website. Check out the niche channel that covers all things Spider-Man and Batman. The link could also be found in the description, as well as the YouTube channel for the podcast itself, if you guys want to check it out on that format. Otherwise, bid you guys adieu. Stay tuned for next week, where I'm going to be talking about some more games that I'm pulling out of the 2022 backlog for Game Pass, for other things I'll be covering, and then, like I said, that Final Fantasy VII remake. I'm sorry, Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary breakdown as far as what they showed off, what they're showing off for the Capcom Dragon's Dogma thing, any other showcases that might be announced and shown off. I'll try to cover them since it is that time of the season, as well as my review of, well, I was going to say episode 5 of Obi-Wan, but if I manage to catch the finale in time for the recording of the podcast, maybe those 2 episodes as well as of Obi-Wan, along with my next review of Ms. Marvel. So stay tuned for that, guys. In the meantime, though, you know what to do. Stay humble.